Hi everyone, Heather here. So today we are going to work on this mom and baby image. And the first thing that I want to do is, I love the dress in this one, but mom liked the profile that you could see his little face in this other image. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to fix the dress and then touch up the background. So how I want to do that is I want to bring this image in over top of the other one, but I'm going to just kind of straighten it up a little. We'll just go into the cropping tool, and you can take this little straighten ruler and we're just going to drag it from there to there and it'll straighten it up for us. Hit enter. This one will probably do the same thing, just to straighten it out a little. There we go. Alright, so actually I'm going to bring this one into the other one here. And I'm going to actually move her over a little bit. Oh, sorry. Let's just make a new copy. And I'm going to move her over. And we can clean up the backdrop and everything after. Alright, so now I'm going to bring this one in. I'm going to go a layer, duplicate layer, and then find the other image and bring it over. Alright, so I'm going to turn this one into a smart object. So I just right clicked and then went convert to smart object, which would have been right where the rasterized layer was. Alright, so now I'm just going to turn the opacity down so I can see where to line her up. Let's just zoom in a little bit here. I just want to make sure that I mean, she's pretty much the same position, so I'm just going to try and line her nose up and her profile up a little bit. Okay, so her nose is completely lined up. So I'm going to go control, or sorry, I'm just going to bring the opacity up on this one. I'm going to make a layer mask by hitting this little camera, and I'm going to fill it. So I'm going to hit Control I to invert that mask. Alright, and then I'll take my brush. Oh, not that brush. Just a soft round brush. And I'm going to start painting the other profile picture in. So my brush is at 100%. And I'm just going to keep brushing it in, and we'll see what we need to fix once I've got it all brushed in here. Okay, I'm just going to turn my mask on. Alright, so let's see where this front of the dress is going to line up. Right about there. Okay, and so the only thing that I really need to go back in to adjust would be this part of the dress here. So I'm actually just going to hit X on my keyboard, and it's going to bring up the black brush, and I'm going to start painting that back out. Oh, I see, it's the arm. Okay. Alright, so we'll probably have to use the clone tool to take that out. So I'm just going to kind of bring back my white brush. I'm just going back and forth just so that I can see, you know, what's going to be the best blending. Oh, I'm going to hit Control Z to go back. There we go. Alright, so far that's kind of the best there. And I'm just going to get a really small brush here and try and bring back the skirt from the other one. Alright, so what I'll have to do is I'll have to clone this bit right here. And then we'll probably do some Liquify just to even that out a little bit more. Alright, so what I'll need to do to clone is I'll have to make a brand new layer. So I'm going to hit Shift Control Alt E, and that's going to bring up a new layer. So all these layers underneath are combined together into the one layer above it. So I'm going to get my clone tool here, which is this one, the stamp tool. We're going to have the opacity at 100%. We'll just zoom in here. And so the way you kind of want to work with the clone tool is you want to select very close next to it, and then just kind of go over top. So I'm going to hit Alt. I'm going to grab, I can see a line right here, so I'm going to start there. I'm going to grab next to that, and I'm just going to paint that out. Now we also may have to do some patching and all that kind of fun stuff too. The main thing is we want to get the dress, the blue out. So however we do that, that's fine, we'll figure it out. Okay, so I'm just going to keep painting this out with the clone tool until it's all done. So I'm just every once in a while hitting Alt and selecting a darker color. Alright, so this looks pretty messy, so I'm going to actually get the patch tool and start patching it up a bit as well. So the patch tool is this one right here. Zoom in. And we'll just start selecting some of this messy clones. The only thing is I wouldn't really want to use this patch tool before cloning, because if I used it with the blue, what it does is it tries to take the two things that you're selecting and kind of blend them together. So it would have turned out kind of blue and mucky if I had done that. So that's why I chose to do the patch tool first. So now it looks all nice and even. Just show you before and after there. All right, so let's see what we want to do about the backdrop. Now, I could crop it in a little bit. So let's get the crop tool. I might just crop the bottom slightly. So maybe about right there, and I'll hit enter. And the first thing I'll do is take my square marquee tool and select the base here and hit Shift F5, and that's going to bring up my fill. So we want to make sure we have content aware put in there at 100%, and we'll just hit OK. Alright, and that's filled it in perfect for us. Now I'm going to try and do the above one. So again, Shift F5 and hit enter. That did a pretty good job. So I'm just gonna kind of clean up a little bit here. Take a couple more selections. All right, and this one right here needs a little cleaning. All right, so that looks okay for now. And I'm going to do this part in kind of smaller sections just because it's so close to her skirt here. So again, Shift F5. And down here, Shift F5. And let's try doing some of her dress here. Pretty good. All right, I'm gonna try, let me just zoom in. I'll try to do this part because I want it to be shadowed, so we'll see what it's gonna do here. Shift F5. Shift F5. There we are. Okay. Now I'm gonna just take my patch tool and touch that up a little bit. Okay. So now I'm just gonna kind of clean up the background a bit and smooth it out. What I love about these paper backgrounds is because they don't have any texture, they smooth out really nicely when you use the patch tool. So to take the wrinkles and stuff out, it's so simple just to take the patch tool and clean it up. If you had like a textured background or like a floral background or something else, it would be a little more challenging. You'd have to probably figure out that with a different kind of tool. But patch tool with these paper backgrounds works perfect. Don't have to worry about any patterns being like multiplied and looking obvious that you just use the patch tool to clean it up, or sometimes when you use the patch tool on a texture, it just causes some weird like kind of bumpiness a little bit. Like, I don't even know how to explain it. Like the texture, if you don't have the texture lining up perfectly, it looks off. Like it just doesn't look like real. Definitely looks like you've edited it. Control Alt E and make a new layer, and I'll rename this layer Liquify. And you go Filter, Liquify. Alright, we'll zoom in a little. Don't you guys love how chunky he is? He's so cute. Alright, let's liquefy her back here just a little bit. He's obviously heavy. She's compensating for holding him, leaning back a little bit. So I'm just gonna bring her a little more upright with the Liquify tool. Just gonna even out the shoulder a bit too. I always like to bring a little more volume in their hair with Liquify as well. Just be careful with parts like this because I don't want to make his foot look liquefied, so just be careful with parts like that. I'm gonna have to go in and clone that bit out that I missed. And the other thing I like to do in Liquify is add some like fun effects into the skirt. So I'm just gonna make my brush bigger, and we're gonna pull it out this way to make it look very like the wind is really blowing her skirt, and then the opposite way, and again back this way. And we're gonna make the skirt a little bigger. Again, just keep making small movements and just bring the skirt out more and more and more. Alright, let's see the before and after. Yeah, I like that, so I'll hit OK. And like I said, I do have to zoom in and kind of clean up that one spot I missed. Right in her knee here. And I will take probably the patch tool to do that. Again, you just hit Alt to select, and we'll clean that up. All right, and zoom out. Okay, so I'm going to maybe bring the highlights on the little guy down a bit as well before I move on to the next step. So I'm going to go into my curves, and I'm just going to take the highlights point and bring it down. So I find that he's maybe a little too bright. He was pretty close to my light there, so that's a bit better. And now that I'm done this, I'm going to flatten it. You don't have to flatten, you could always just keep making new layers, but I feel like this is done, so I'm just going to flatten it. And I'll make one more new layer and we'll kind of even out the backdrop even more. I'm going to soften the edges. So I'm going to go into my actions here and I'm going to go to my soften edge action and just hit play. And I'll zoom in so you can kind of see the effect of that action. It's just softened it a bit. So let's turn it up so you can really have a look. There. Now you can kind of see it. It just softens it quite a bit. So I'm going to turn it down. I'll maybe put it at 50. And we'll flatten that again. And now I'm going to play my frequency separation action, which that one I gave to you guys in the free files. So check that out and I'll show you how I use it. So I'm going to find my frequency separation and the basic one and hit play. Continue. Alright, so what we want to do is all our skin blurring we want to do on the blur layer, and then getting rid of any blemishes and things like that you would do on the gray layer. So we'll start by blurring their skin, and I'm just going to take my little lasso tool here. We'll zoom in, and you just start by selecting small sections of their face. You want to make sure you have your feather at about 10 pixels, and then you just go filter, Gaussian blur, there you go, blur, Gaussian blur, and I usually leave mine at about 7 and hit OK. Now that I've done that filter, I can select it and then hit Control-Alt-F, and it's going to repeat that action that I just did, that blur action. So select, and then you go Control-Alt-F. Control-Alt-F, and just keep doing that until you've done all their skin. With the moms, I normally also keep the action at 7%, the Gaussian blur, but I find that that's maybe a little too much for men, so I only do about 3% for a man on his skin. And sometimes they don't need it at all, so sometimes I'll just leave it and not do any frequency separation on them. But a lady usually likes to have their skin a little smoothed out, so that's what I do. Alright, so we're done that. And now what you want to do on the gray layer is all your spot healing tools or patch tools, anything like that you want to use on the gray layer. So I'm going to use my spot healing tool, and I'm just going to go over their skin and take out any like blemishes or lines that just need a little smoothing out. I usually don't take out birthmarks, but that's up to the client, I guess. If they want something removed, I usually ask how they like their skin to be touched up, and most people will say, you know, cleaned up but to look natural. So any little red patches on baby skin I always take out, but anything that's looks like a birthmark or something like that I will leave in. Alright, so that looks pretty good. The other thing I love doing with my frequency separation action is adding on a couple things. So under the gray layer, I'm just going to click on the blur layer, and I'm going to add a blank layer, and I use this as a paint layer. And I use it under their eyes usually, so at 10% on my brush, I will select a brighter part of their face and just paint under the eye to get rid of some of those dark lines. Now they're pretty far away, so this wouldn't really be noticeable on this one, but just to show you guys, it's very subtle, but it does clean up the skin a lot. And you can paint anywhere on their skin, so if you want to add in some like highlights on the nose, or maybe you want to bring out some more highlights on the baby skin, you could do that by painting it on this layer. And the other thing I like to do is I like to copy the gray layer. So I'm going to pull the gray layer down to this plus button. And as you can see, when I copied that layer, it really sharpened everything. So you want to put a mask on it. So you click the little mask button and invert it. So Control I to invert. And then take your brush at 100% this time. I usually turn the mask, this layer, the top gray layer, down to about 30 or 40% as well, because otherwise it gets too sharp. But I like to use it as a sharpening tool. So I'm just gonna zoom in here a little bit so you can see. And I'm just gonna paint over their features, like their eyes. Oh, I guess I need to be on the actual paint layer. There we go. Oops. Alright, sorry, I have to take a few steps back here. There we go. So, on the gray layer with a white brush, and then I paint over their features. So it just kind of sharpens them up a little bit. Now if I had this at 100%, you'd really see it. See? But I like to keep it pretty subtle, so like 30–40%. And just sharpens up their features a little bit. And that's how I use my frequency separation action. So the next thing that I want to do after frequency separation is maybe some skin color adjustments. So I like to kind of brighten up the highlights, and I use a solid color layer for that. So I usually will select something bright and warm. Well, let's just hit OK on that for now, but I'm going to invert this, Control I, and I'm actually going to just select like a bright part of their skin, maybe that little guy's skin there. Maybe brighten it up a little bit more. And we'll put this on soft light, and we'll bring the opacity down maybe 20%. Let's just see what that's going to look like. So we'll just paint over their highlights here. And I may need to bring the opacity up a little bit on this. So let's just see what that looks like. So it's pretty subtle. Let's bring it up to 40 so you can really see it. That just brightens their skin a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to actually bring it back down. And the next thing that I want to do is maybe take some of the red out of his feet. So I'm going to bring up a probably a curves layer. I'm going to go from the RGB channel to the red channel, and I'm just going to pull some of that red out. Okay, and we'll invert this, Control I. I'll say remove red. This one will be brighten skin. Alright, so let's remove some of the red from this little dude. So I like to leave it in their cheeks, but feet and hands, I'll take the red out. Baby's feet and hands tend to be on the red side, so I just like to take those out a bit. So I'm just going to turn that layer down slightly. There we go. All right. So I also want to brighten up their eyes even more. So I'm just going to go to a curves layer again, but I'm just going to take the midtones up a bit. And we'll invert that, Control I. And I'm actually going to put it on like a soft light. And with a large brush, I'm just going to, oops. With a large brush, I'm just going to paint over. Actually, let's put this back to normal. I'm just going to paint over their eyes and face a little bit, just to brighten it up. There we go. Okay, so let's make another curves layer. I'm going to call this Brighten Face. We'll do another curves layer. I'm going to bring the midtones up quite a bit and invert this layer mask, Control I, and we'll call this one Dodge. And we'll do another curves and bring the midtones down and invert it, Control I, and call this Burn. And so with the Dodge layer, I'm going to run my paintbrush at 100% over all of the highlights. And with the burn, I'm going to actually run it along the bottom here just to bring down this highlight. I don't want the ground as bright as it is. And then we'll go over all of the shadows on the subjects here. All right. So I'm gonna put these in a group. So I'll just select them both and hit Control G. We'll call this Dodge and Burn. And I'm just gonna hit the before and after. Okay, I like that. So I'm just gonna check her skin. and see if there's any adjustments I need to make. So how you would do that is you'd bring up this little dopper tool here, and you'd go into your info, and you want to look at your CMYK colors here. So I'm just going to pick a spot on her face, and actually the colors look good. So you always want your yellow to have the most, and then I always just think of it this way, it's the simplest. So you want more yellow than the magenta and the cyan, a little bit more magenta than cyan, and you want your cyan to be pretty low, because you don't want your skin to look blue. So yep, these are looking good. Alright, so the skin tones are fine. Can go out of here. And so the very last thing that I need to do for this one is put in the flower background. So I'm kind of recreating a picture I've already done when she was pregnant with this little dude. So I have the flower that I used up, and I'm just going to pull it over. I believe it was this one. So this is from my floral texture overlays, and it's very bright when you first drop it in, but once we play around with everything, it'll tone down quite a bit. So we'll hit enter, and we're going to turn this to soft light. And we're going to bring the opacity down to, I usually go like 40-50%. This one maybe it needs a little less than that, maybe like 30. And you could also, if you're not liking how vibrant it is, you can use a hue saturation and just clip it to. So create a clipping mask, you right click and clip it down to your texture. And you can just pull the saturation out as much as you want. There. And so now we just have to kind of paint it off the spots we don't want the florals. So I'm going to put a layer mask on it. And I actually might move it up, because I'm not liking how it's showing up there underneath her. So I'm gonna move it up and over. And let's see. And I'm just going to actually stretch it. So I'm going to unclip that little chain, and I'm going to stretch it down. Maybe I could even warp it. So I'm going to right click it, and I'm going to go to warp. And I just want to bring that, try and get that off her dress there. Oops, the warp didn't work, so let's try again. It's because I have to rasterize this. Sure, I haven't painted anything yet, so let's rasterize the layer. So that rasterizing is basically just it was a smart object when I placed it in. So I'm just undoing that it's a smart object. So we'll hit Control T again, and I'm gonna try to warp it. There we go. So all I want to do is I just don't want that blue showing up right here. So there we go, all fixed. Hit enter. And let's see how much, maybe I want to take out a little bit more. Saturation. Can't talk today. Alright, so now we have to put that layer mask back on, and we're going to paint it out off of them. So at my brush at 100%, I'm going to brush it off the center of them. So off their face. Okay, and now at about 40%, I'm going to make my brush bigger. And again, I'm going to just kind of run it along them. And 20%. Make my brush even bigger, and just again go around them. Alright, so I'm just gonna zoom in and make sure that there's no like noticeable parts of the flowers on them still. Okay, I'm going to blur this layer a little bit as well. So let's just oops. I'm just going to clean up my mask a little bit here, especially on the dress. My mask was very messy. Just clean it up a little. Okay, so that should be good. Alright, so on this one, I'm going to add a filter. So I'm going to go filter, blur, Gaussian blur. I don't know if I want it at 7. Probably a little less than that, maybe like, let's try 5. That looks good. So I feel like this base here is still too dark, so I'm going to do another curves layer. Again, bring the midtones down and invert that, so Control I. And I'm going to take a big black brush, sorry, big white brush, and try and darken up these corners here a bit. I'm gonna just lower the opacity and clean up this part here. There, that's better. Alright, so I also want to add a bit of contrast. So I'm gonna bring another curves layer up, and we're going to take the darker tones down a bit and the brighter tones up a bit. And we want to turn this layer, so see how it's kind of making everything a little more saturated when I use the curves. I don't want that to happen, so I'm going to change it to luminosity. So it's just going to affect the lightness and darkness of it, not so much the color. And we're just going to turn the opacity on this one down to maybe 30%. Yeah, that looks good. All right. We could also add even a little bit more of a vignette. So I'm going to go into a gradient, and I'm going to make that a radial gradient and reverse it. And maybe we want this to be like a darker tone, so I'm thinking like a dark brown some sort. And this one, I'm going to make it their bright skin tone. Or you could just have it translucent, but I'm going to keep it as their dark, as their skin tone. And we'll hit OK. Maybe I will bring this down a bit. What was it at 100? Let's do 120. Yeah. Like that. Hit OK, and we're going to put this on soft light and bring the opacity down. So I'm not loving how this layer is changing the color, so I'm actually going to just bring the saturation all the way off. And let's bring it back in until I like it here. Maybe right about there. Alright, that looks nice. So I do want to enhance the highlights and shadows a bit more on her, so I'm going to do one more layer. And actually there's a couple things that I'm noticing I want to change. I actually don't really like her little toe peeking out here at the bottom. So I'm going to make a new layer, so I'm going to hit Shift Control Alt E, and I'm just going to use that to patch her toe out. Just not loving how it's one toe poking out. Alright. And then I want to do one more Liquify. So I'm going to go Filter, Liquify. Alright, so I'm going to make my brush really, really small. And I'm going to zoom in here. Just bring her chin up a little bit, and we will kind of liquify this area here at the bottom. Zoom in a bit more. Alright, and we'll hit OK on that. Alright, so the last thing I want to do again is just bring up the highlights a bit more. Go up to Layer, New Layer, and we'll call this one Dodge and Burn. And we're going put it to overlay, and we're going to fill the overlay with 50% gray, and we'll hit OK. And now I'm going to actually take my dodge tool. So when I'm dodging the highlights, I want the range to actually have highlights selected, and then we're only going to keep the percent really low. So I only work in like 2-3% when I'm doing this. Otherwise, if you go too high, you could actually burn the skin, which would cause redness to happen, and we don't want that. So we will keep it at 2%. And I'm just going to bring out some of these highlights even more. And so I just like to build it up. So if I'm working in 2% and I run it across once and it's not enough, I'll just keep going over that spot until it looks right to me. Just bring up the highlight on her nose and his little nose. So this is going to really add to that painterly effect. So I zoomed out maybe a little too much. There we go. Get some of these smaller highlights as well. That's in the dress. Alright, so let's just see how that's looking. Again, it's just making some of the highlights pop a little bit more. I don't feel like it needs any more dodging, any more burning. So I'll just leave it like that. And I think I might crop in the bottom again just a little bit. And we'll hit enter there. And I feel like this is a done image. So I'm going to hit go file save, and it's going to save a PSD for me. Actually, it saved it as a TIFF, a layered TIFF. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to actually save 2 of these for my client. So I'm going to save one with the florals, and then I'm going to save a second layer, or second one without that layer in it. I'll have to go in and adjust that one bit again, but yeah, I'll save one like this, and then I'll save one with the florals. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and we will see you in the next video. Bye!